In the 5th century BC, republican magistracies were monopolized by aristocrats called patricians. This caused great tension in relations with two other groups of the population: the poor, who now had to turn to a patrician judge with questions against arbitrary decisions of patrician magistrates, for example, consuls, and the rich non-patricians, who had to fight in battle and pay taxes, but they were not allowed to vote in the decision on the war and the world. In 490 BC, these two groups united and demanded political rights. From now on, the opposition was called the plebs. They created an Anton registry of the people's tribune, who was supposed to protect the rights of the plebeians. In the sacred law, the plebeians swore that they would protect the human tribune at all costs, which made him sacred. That is, he could not be attacked by patrician magistrates. This allowed him to veto decisions of consuls, sentences of praetors, and financial decisions of quaestors. After a brief struggle, the patricians recognized two tribunes, but demanded that they not veto military decisions. Thus, the tribunes were a kind of anti-magistrates elected by the People's Assembly. The tribunes were also the chairman of the People's Assembly, sometimes held the position of aedile, and had to help the poor plebeians. In the 4th and 3rd centuries, when the conflict between patricians and plebeians was over, the tribunes had new functions. For example, the tribunes could convene a meeting of the Senate and arrest magistrates. Their houses had to remain open to visitors even at night, and they were not allowed to be more than a day's journey from Rome. Although the tribunes served a potentially very revolutionary function, they were usually moderate, at least after the goals of the plebeians were achieved in the 360s. However, in the 2nd century, the magistracy became revolutionary again, when Tiberius Gracchus used it to propose an agrarian law to the People's Assembly against the will of the Senate. This caused a lot of controversy. First, one of his colleagues, Marcus Octavius, vetoed the proposal, something that has never happened before. As a result, Gracchus overthrows Octavius, again doing something unthinkable. And finally, to make sure that the agrarian law would come into force, Gracchus wanted to be re-elected. But this had never happened in 2 centuries, and of course, it was unheard of arrogance. After such incidents, the duties and functions of the tribune were changed. Eventually, Tiberius Gracchus was assassinated by conservative senators. Later, his brother Guy suffered the same fate. The lesson was that social and political reforms could take place only when the tribunes controlled the People's Assembly and had military support. At the end of the 2nd and first half of the 1st century, several tribunes tried to do this, but they usually failed. For example, Lucius Appuleius Saturninus in 100 BC. Later, reformers looked for successful military commanders who bought the tribunes, for example, Pompey and Julius Caesar. When Emperor Augustus founded the monarchy, he assumed the rights and duties of the tribune indefinitely and thus greatly strengthened the imperial power.